Good Friday afternoon to you. Hope your weekend is off to a good start. Welcome to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. 2020 is here, and go figure, the Browns are still trying to get the head coach and front office aligned and correct. This year's version, Jimmy Haslam is doing the 2-minute drill with what he's looking for in this year's coaching and front office search.
I do think this sets us up well to first hire a head coach and then have the head coach be involved in the hiring of the GM. I want to stress it will not solely be the head coach's decision. It will be a collaborative process involving ownership and several other members of top management, if you will, as we hire the GM. I'll say this, we're really excited about the group of candidates that we're going to be interviewing over the next several days, and I think maybe despite all the changes we've made, I think it's a very attractive job. Everybody in the NFL knows how important football is in this area. I think everybody understands we have a really good young quarterback and a really good core group of players. So we're excited about the opportunity to work with these candidates over the next week or two or however long it takes.
So how's Coach McCarthy doing today? And is NFL head coaching experience a prerequisite?
I think it'd be unfair to coach, to say, but obviously he's got great experience. He's won 62% of his games, and that speaks for himself. So we've really enjoyed our time with him, and head coaching experience is not necessarily a prerequisite. If you'll notice, we're interviewing people who have been head coaches in the NFL and people who are not.
Jimmy, is Urban Meyer a candidate?
Right now, we're just focusing on people with NFL experience. If you look over the last couple of years, I think the first thing you have to do is really understand the players in place. And it's really important to know your own team. And everybody looks at who we add. And I think it's really important also to look at who we subtract. And don't get me wrong, there could be some changes in the roster, but we have a pretty solid group of core players who are all extremely young.
And again, Jimmy Haslam trying to get it right this time with a new head coach and a new general manager as we get set to play football in 2020. What would New Year be without a front office restructuring for our Cleveland Browns? When we return, we'll bring in Dan Labbe. He's fluent speaking Browns. He'll unpack some of this and give us some analysis. More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downton Casino now has sports betting. Use one of the 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet. Then watch your favorite games on our new HD televisions or visit our new sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downton Casino.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had two choices. I was accepted into a 4-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Leonard, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Welcome Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. January means it's refiguring the front office month for our Cleveland Browns. Time to welcome in Dan Labbe, the Browns beat reporter from cleveland.com. He speaks Browns as fluently as anybody. So, Dan, your biggest takeaways. We heard Jimmy Haslam in 2 minutes. Biggest takeaways from the press conference late this week that where he finally addresses the media.
Well, obviously he laid out the structure that he wants for his new regime, but I thought the telling thing was he kind of admitted, we don't know if we're going to get this right, which is sort of what fans and a lot of us have been saying. We just don't know if the Browns are going to get this right, and he seemed to admit that. He mentioned at one point, what they learned in their second and third searches, and then referenced the last 2 searches. This guy has only owned the team since 2012, so it's just sort of a reminder of all the upheaval, all the unrest that has sort of pervaded the Jimmy Haslam ownership.
It's kind of interesting because the process, he felt, was kind of compromised last year, which is why he wants Paul DePodesta, a systems guy, in charge of that search. So basically, I think what that's telling, at least my takeaway was, the search committee came back with Kevin Stefanski, and John Dorsey and the football guys said, no, we're going with Freddie.
Yeah, it just felt like there was a clear divide in between those two things. And another thing that Haslam said yesterday is the use of analytics and play calling. He mentioned, Baker Mayfield is best out of these sets or best in these formations, and that's what we want to build the offense around. And it makes you wonder if maybe they looked at things and said that's not happening. And based on what we saw in the offense and how Baker regressed in year 2, it sure seems like that wasn't happening. They weren't playing to his strengths. So it seems like they're going a little bit more towards the analytics side again, but they're not going quite as far in as they did when they brought in Sashi Brown, but they're going to let Paul DePodesta really sort of drive this thing a little bit.
And that's kind of interesting because, again, you're devoid of a football guy with John Dorsey gone. There isn't a clear, quote-unquote, football guy making those decisions. All right, having said that, let's take a look at, John Dorsey, who did some really good things with the talent level. Let's take a look at what you like as far as top 3 moves that John Dorsey made.
Well, the first thing I really liked was drafting Nick Chubb, right? That's the easy one. You take him with the number 35 overall pick. You take a running back a little higher than maybe running backs are going nowadays, but you brought in a guy who has been one of the best players in your roster. He was the one bright spot on offense this season. Almost won the rushing title, probably should have won the rushing title, maybe with a different play caller. So I like that pick. Another draft pick, Denzel Ward. And I point that one out because they could have taken Bradley Chubb there, and maybe you still make the case that you take Bradley Chubb, but Denzel Ward has been really good. I thought he had a really good season when he was healthy. I know the interception numbers aren't super high, but that's because people don't like to throw his way all that often. I thought he did a really good job. And Jarvis Landry, trading for Jarvis Landry was such a huge move. It brought in a leader. It brought in a guy that could set a culture in that wide receiver. And when you talk to young wide receivers, the thing they always said was, Jarvis Landry was the leader. When I walked into that room, it was Jarvis Landry. Even Sheldon Richardson said, when I first signed here, Jarvis Landry sat down with me and talked about the goals and the expectations. So that, to me, is a huge move for this team.
It's kind of interesting because you mentioned Chubb and you mentioned Landry. Landry's probably one of the better blocking wide receivers in the league. And you have one of the better running backs, and yet the play calling seemed to want to throw the ball. You kind of sit there and wonder, don't they realize what they are at this point?
Yeah.
That was the biggest question that I had.
And I'm sitting in Cincinnati watching them losing to the Bengals, and Andy Dalton scores a touchdown. And I look at the stat sheet, and Nick Chubb had only carried the ball a few more times than Andy Dalton. And Kareem Hunt had carried the ball fewer times than Andy Dalton. I think he only had like 2 carries in the first half. You've got 2 top 5 running backs in the league. At worst, 2 top 10 running backs in the league. And Freddie Kitchens never really embraced using them.
Yeah, and the flip side of that is it only makes your wide receivers better and your quarterback better
now
if you use them. Yeah.
And linebackers have to pay attention to those guys. I mean, just bringing Kareem Hunt in motion sometimes, you would see a linebacker would have to follow him out. It would open something up for Chubb. It would open something up for Landry over the middle. Sometimes it really is easy. Or it should be.
All right. Now we talked about the top 3 John Dorsey moves. Let's look at the bottom 3, the worst 3 moves that John Dorsey made.
Well, we got to start with the guy we just talked about, right? Freddie Kitchens. And I'll be honest, at some point I probably bought myself into Freddie Kitchens. I'm sure some Old Takes Exposed account out there can go find some glowing column I wrote about Kitchens. But the reality is it became clear pretty quickly this guy was in over his head. head. And it wasn't Freddie Kitchens' fault. It was John Dorsey's fault for choosing him and putting him in that position. And that's why the Browns went 6-10.
Yeah, no, and you know, you make a really valid point. It wasn't too long before you kind of sat there and said, what are you doing? You know, especially with the play calling.
Well, like week 1, when they come out and lose 43-13 and commit 18 penalties, or at least have 18 penalties accepted against them, it became very obvious that maybe this wasn't going to work pretty quickly.
And all right, so Freddie Kitchens, and that one probably ultimately cost John Dorsey his job, because it sounded like he didn't want to cede any power, especially into a potential new coaching search. And there are even some reports that he wanted to bring Freddie Kitchens back.
Yeah, I think there was some support in the front office to maybe bring Kitchens back for a second year and see if he could develop into the job. But the reality is that year 3 for Baker Mayfield is just too important. You cannot risk bringing Freddie back. And I think that may be why John Dorsey is not here.
All right, so too much Freddie Kitchens. Then the second thing that you thought was kind of a downfall, just too much risk.
Yeah, and especially with a guy like Antonio Callaway, right? Like you take the gamble on Kareem Hunt, you bring him in, and it works. But then you rely way too much on a guy like Antonio Callaway, and it was just obvious that this was a guy you could not rely on. And then you bring him back against San Francisco, he drops that ball on the goal line, he's not lining up in the right places. He's still playing after that over and over and over again until they finally decided to waive him before the Steelers game on that Thursday night. Just relying too much on a guy like that because he was too important to this team. He couldn't be your third wide receiver. He needed to be down the depth chart a little bit, especially once he got suspended in training camp. That should have been all you needed to know. When he was gone those first 4 games, you should have known we can't rely on this guy. And John Dorsey just relies too much on guys that bring some character baggage.
The other thing that's interesting is a guy like Rashard Higgins, who was Baker Mayfield's security blanket, a guy who he had a really good understanding with, disappeared. I mean, I think the last pass thrown to him was a touchdown. What a game. How bizarre is that?
It was strange. And, you know, he was inactive the last game of the season, and clearly there was something going on there between him and Kitchens. But that was also some inconsistency, right? Because Callaway kept showing up out there. There were other guys who maybe made mistakes or things like that kept showing up out on the field, but Rashard Higgins couldn't get out there. Kareem Hunt, obviously, his emergence was a big reason for that as well. He kind of became your third wide receiver. But when you start to rely on guys like Callaway too much, it's going to come back and burn you.
And then, you know, the third thing that was not a good move for John Dorsey. The third of the 3 never really addressed the offensive line.
Yeah, that was the biggest issue. Obviously, trade Kevin Zeitler for Olivier Vernon, and that trade at this point has not worked out because Vernon was hurt for most of the second half of the season. You know, he played okay in the first half, but you give up a guy like Kevin Zeitler, and you never really have a plan to replace him. You thought maybe it would be Austin Corbett, who you spent the number 33 pick on. Well, now he's part of the LA Rams, and he was playing there. You know, so maybe there was a way to get Corbett on the field, but your left tackle is shaky, your right tackle is shaky, your right guard was shaky. You got a great center, you got a great left guard. You can build something in this offensive line, but you know, you gambled too much with Greg Robinson, and you never addressed the right guard situation. And Baker Mayfield was running for his life.
And then I think the other thing about that offensive line that comes back to it is you can design plays that minimize it, and they never did.
Yeah, and that was one of the victories of the last 8 games of 2018 was the offensive line actually played pretty well, and a lot of it was because of the scheme and the play calling. But then you come back in 2019, and all of that is gone. It's funny what happens when defensive coordinators who work 100-hour weeks can sort of start to adjust for you and figure out your tendencies and what you want to do as a play caller.
So I guess the big question is it better after John Dorsey put his stamp on it than it was when he came in?
Yeah, you know, even though you can make a real case that maybe it was time to move on from John Dorsey, especially if he was going to tie himself so closely to Freddie Kitchens, I do think the roster is better than when John Dorsey took it over. And I think whoever takes this roster over, and we learned, beware of expectations on paper, right? But this roster is really good, and I think with a better coach, this team could have won 8, 9, 10 games, depending on the level of coach this year. So I think the roster is good enough to make the playoffs. You've just got to get the right people in charge. And of course, look, you've got to address the O-line, you've got to address some holes on defense. But the roster is better than when John Dorsey took over.
Yeah, I would agree without question. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Dan Labbe, beat reporter for cleveland.com, the Browns beat reporter, with us. When we return, we'll talk some head coaching candidates. It's Cleveland Browns football. What else would we be talking about other than head coaching or front office candidates in January? More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition will be right back. Stay with us.
Get your basement ready for the holidays.
There was moisture in the basement. It ruined the carpeting. The smell was terrible. We didn't feel safe in our own basement, and that's when we called Nature Stone.
And with Russell's Promise, our true unconditional warranty, you will never have to replace your basement flooring again. For a limited time, get Nature Stone installed now and pay nothing until next year. Payments as low as $99 a month. No interest, no down payment. Schedule your free cost estimate easily online today. It's not just a floor. Wow, it's Nature Stone.
National Holidays expert Mary here with a list of holidays you won't want to miss. Get your Ohio Lottery Merry Million scratch-offs for National Donut Day, National Have a Party with Your Bear Day, Pickle Day, National Unique Talent Day, Take a Hike Day, and America's favorite, National Jukebox Day. Every day is a reason to celebrate. Grab a Merry Millions and other Ohio Lottery holiday scratch-offs today.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget. Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Dave Bacon here with Dan Labbe, beat reporter for the Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. And Dan, it's January. What would January be without a head coaching search? It's kind of interesting. The Browns focusing more on guys with NFL experience. You can make the case Freddie Kitchens had some, but it seems like they're more honed in on getting a guy that has been a coordinator, has had some success at that higher level.
Yeah, that was the thing with Freddie. He had only been a coordinator for 8 games. I mean, his resume was so thin that John Dorsey had to say a number of times, you see him call plays on the 4th preseason game. So that's probably when the red flag should have gone up for all of us. But they're looking for guys who have some experience, who have shown some leadership. Jimmy Haslam ruled out Urban Meyer yesterday. But the key there is he said, right now. So, if this maybe goes sideways or something, I wouldn't rule anything out for this franchise. But right now, it's about guys with that NFL experience, guys who have done it at this level.
So we know for certain that Mike McCarthy has been interviewed. We know that Greg Roman has been interviewed. We know that Eric Bieniemy is being interviewed. There's a common theme there.
Yeah.
So what do you, as you sit back and kind of listen, and again, you've heard far more of this than I have, and thankfully I haven't heard it a lot. What does it appear? Does it appear that they want an offensive mind that can kind of mold Baker Mayfield? Is that?
It seems early on that's where they're leaning, right? With Mike McCarthy, a guy that worked with Aaron Rodgers for a long time, Greg Roman, who of course built that offense in first San Francisco and now Baltimore. And I would be curious to see what he could do with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the Browns' backfield around Baker Mayfield, even though he's a different quarterback than Lamar. And then of course Eric Bieniemy, who comes from Kansas City, is not the play caller there, but he is the offensive coordinator, handles the installs, and really seems to have a lot of those leadership traits you look for. I'm really curious about a guy like him. But then they're going to go to San Francisco and they're going to talk to Robert Saleh, who's the defensive coordinator there. He's really the one defensive guy kind of on this list right now, but they're also going to probably take advantage and talk to some other guys down there who maybe could be potential coordinators, potential position coaches, things like that. Mike McDaniel's a guy that has worked for the Browns in the past. Maybe he becomes an offensive coordinator for whoever they hire as a head coach. So that's really they're casting a very wide net, and I think that's a good thing because last year they really didn't cast a very wide net.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Last year they didn't interview Mike McCarthy. They didn't interview Josh McDaniel, and it sounds like Josh McDaniel is kind of the main guy. Do you think they're putting too many eggs in that basket? Because immediately when they said the name Josh McDaniel, it was like, well, he'd never come there with John Dorsey as a GM.
Yeah, I think they really like Josh McDaniels. I think he's the guy that the Haslams have really liked, for a while. But he's sort of bided his time. And after what happened in Denver, he went back to New England, has rebuilt his reputation. It obviously took a hit when he went to Indianapolis and decided to walk away from that job at the very last minute. Things worked out okay for the Colts, but Chris Ballard, the GM there, is very good friends with John Dorsey. So I don't know that those two ever could have worked together. If Josh McDaniels is ready, I think he's an intriguing name. But there's risk there, because what if he does it again? What if he takes the job and then a couple days later he's like, I don't know if I want to leave New England all of a sudden. But maybe the time is right because Tom Brady is looking a little bit older. The Patriots are looking a little bit shakier. You never leave either of those things for dead. You never leave Brady or the Patriots for dead. But maybe the time is right for McDaniels to move on, and I do think he really liked Baker Mayfield coming out.
The other thing is Bill Belichick is getting up there in age, and at some point you kind of get the sense that he may step away when Tom Brady does. Does he really have it in him to go find another guy like Tom Brady?
Yeah, exactly. and so then if you're Josh McDaniels, you're kind of weighing, okay, do I want to stay in New England? Maybe he's the heir apparent in New England, but is New England going into a rebuild, which is a crazy thing to say after what we've seen from them over the last 20 years. But he's got to weigh some things. If he maybe could take over that job, does he want to come home to Cleveland? It's hard to coach at home. I think we know that. If you win, it's spectacular. But if you lose, all that goodwill is out the window.
And the thing is Cleveland any more difficult than dealing with the Boston or the East Coast media? I mean, really.
No, I think Cleveland is, when it comes to football, as big a market as there is. The way this football team is covered, it's absolutely insane. There's some markets where you go and you wonder if anybody covers the team some days. Mike Prefer, the special teams coach, his first press conference this year, he goes up to the podium. There's a huge crowd there, and he says something along the lines, you guys know I'm just the special teams coach, right? It was never like this in Minnesota. So that's sort of, Cleveland is a different animal in that sense.
Is there anybody that's kind of like a dark horse candidate that you would say, hey, keep your ear out for a guy like this? It might be McCarthy, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's one of the guys we talked about. One name we didn't mention is Kevin Stefanski. I wouldn't call him a dark horse. He's probably one of the favorites. He was a finalist last year. He'll probably be a finalist again this year. But I think that makes maybe Greg Roman could be a dark horse. I think maybe those are sort of the names. Eric Bieniemy, a dark horse. Some of these early names they're interviewing are probably the dark horses for this job because the focus, I think, for a lot of fans and a lot of us is on, okay, is Stefanski going to get another real shot at this? And then is Josh McDaniels the guy that they're after? And then everybody beyond those two is kind of, okay, let's see what happens.
Are you concerned that it's Paul DePodesta that's in charge of it, or is that more a function of, the owner wants to stay true to the process? Because last time, they went through the process, we found out, and John Dorsey said, well, that was all nice and good, but this is the guy we're going with.
I think it's fair to be nervous about Paul DePodesta just because he's never really done this in the football sense. He's been in the NFL now since 2016, which is still pretty new. So I think it's fair to be a little concerned, but you hope that what happens is if you're going to put this in Paul DePodesta's hands, okay, let it be in his hands. And the names he comes up with, pick off that list. Don't go rogue. Don't say, yeah, I know you guys are saying Kevin Stefanski's the guy, but we want Freddie Kitchens. You've got to trust this process. You've got to say, all right, this is who we came up with. And nobody's going to swoop in at the last minute and say, yeah, but this guy really blew me away in that interview. You've got to trust what you're putting in place.
And the other thing is it's not as critical that you have football knowledge when you're hiring a head football. It's not like you're going to have.
You're hiring the guys with football knowledge.
Exactly.
That's the job.
You gotta find a guy that can be a leader in charge of things and connect with his team. You don't have to know the X's and O's. So I guess from that standpoint, DePodesta has hired a number of baseball guys.
Yeah.
It's different sport, but you're looking for similar traits.
You've got to be a leader, right? I mean, that's sort of the buzzword, and it was sort of funny yesterday when Jimmy Haslam sat up there and laid out, these are the, 5 things we're looking at. It was like leadership, knows football, and, well, of course, every team is looking for that stuff. But yeah, I mean, those are the things you're looking for. You're looking for someone who can come in and lead this football team and be a strong voice for your locker room.
All right, we're going to step aside and take a quick timeout. When we return, we'll talk the other side, the two-headed monster, general manager. Browns need a head coach, need a general manager. It's January 2020, Groundhog's Day for our Cleveland Browns. More sports and less Levine. Weekend Winners Edition. We'll be right back with Dan Labbe, the Browns beat reporter here at cleveland.com. Thank you.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had two choices. I was accepted into a four-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Leonard, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
It takes attention to detail. With your local Bryant dealer, you're getting more than just a technician. You're getting someone who pays attention to your needs and the little things that make a big difference. It takes a dealer you can rely on. And to keep your family warm this winter,
here, let me show you how this works.
It takes Bryant.
Bryant. Whatever it takes.
And to keep your family comfortable, it takes Smiley One Heating and Cooling. Find them at smiley1.com.
More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition continues. I'm Dave Bacon, joined by Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com. Okay, Dan, we've mentioned we're at it again. A new GM, a new head coach for our Cleveland Browns. Is it a sign of progress that Jimmy Haslam wants to hire the coach and have the coach have input into the general manager to avoid the dysfunction that has happened before between those two player acquisition and guy coaching players that have been acquired?
Yeah, I do think it's a good sign that he's taking this approach. Look, the issue to me has never actually been the structure. It's always been the ownership, and it's always been their approach to this. So that's not going anywhere. They're going to have to change the way they do things. But at the very least, you're not forcing two guys together. You're not bringing in a GM like John Dorsey and saying, well, you've got to keep this coach that just went 1-31. You're not bringing in Sashi Brown and forcing a head coach on him that maybe he didn't want. You're bringing in your head coach, and then you're going to bring in your GM, and those two are going to be aligned. Hopefully, they're going to be aligned, and ownership is going to be able to sort of play the referee when things start to go awry and say, no, guys, stop. This is how we do it. The problem has always been they've been unable to necessarily to do that consistently. Right. But hopefully, this structure is going to be more aligned and work a little smoother.
When you say hopefully, I start to chuckle because you never know what's going to happen. But it's kind of interesting. Do you think, and I asked this earlier, you heard Josh McDaniel early in the process. Do you think this structure points to that? You want a guy like Josh McDaniel, who's worked with the best offense, to be very comfortable with the GM. And I have a follow-up to you with that as well, though. Yeah. So I'm setting you up here.
I do think, Josh McDaniels, when he was in Denver, had some personnel control. And I think he's sort of looked at that and said, maybe he doesn't want quite as much of that power, at least initially. So then you start looking at a guy like a Nick Caserio or a Dave Ziegler, guys in that Patriots front office that could leave and come to Cleveland and work with McDaniels. That's sort of what you're looking at, I think. That's sort of where that's coming from. Maybe that's the hope that they're going to land that. But there are some other options out there. But it does just feel like, let's see if we can get McDaniels here and see if we can bring one of those Patriots guys with him.
And you mentioned that. Those guys have local connections. They were at John Carroll. There's a number of John Carroll guys.
Coaching.
Yeah, no kidding. They're going to steal that from my cradle of NFL coaching and NFL personnel. You mentioned Caserio, Ziegler, McDaniel. The question I have, though, does it work if Bill Belichick isn't there? Because, it's not like you look at the Patriots and you go, boy, they got a lot of talent. You look at it and you go, boy, they know how to use what they have, which if the Browns could have done that, we'd be talking about them in the playoffs.
Yeah, and, I think what you hang your hat on is hopefully part of that is Josh McDaniels, right? How he's built that offense, whether it's been with Rob Gronkowski or whether they've had some good receivers or whether they've had to run the ball and figure out what to do with James White in the playoffs. He's been able to adapt around Tom Brady. We talk about the offensive line. They don't always have great offensive linemen, but McDaniels and Dante Scarnecchia make that offensive line great. Maybe you could steal Scarnecchia and bring him to Cleveland too. That would be great. But that's part of the hope you would have in that. And, the Belichick coaching tree has had mixed results, but we're going to watch some guys in the playoffs that come from it, and Mike Vrabel, Bill O'Brien. Brian Flores was really good this year in Miami considering the circumstances. So, maybe that part of it is starting to turn a little bit too.
Well, the question, though, that I have is, and this is nothing against Caserio or Ziegler. Isn't Belichick identifying the guys and telling them, go get me? So my question is are the personnel guys at the Patriots, is it going to be McDaniel saying, go get me that guy? Does that work?
That's
that question.
That's what the Patriots have, or that's what the Browns have to figure out, is how much of it is Bill Belichick, how much of it is Nick Caserio identifying talent and serving as sort of that scout GM role, but it's going to be the head coach and the GM really sitting down and making these decisions, and there is some risk there when you reach into that Patriots tree because Bill Belichick is so good and Tom Brady is so good and makes guys so much better. Again, I hate to say this, but I guess we'll see. That's the way it is with Jimmy Haslam and everything this ownership group does. You can talk a good game, but we'll see once the games start.
Now, there are some holdovers from the John Dorsey regime, Elliott Wolf among them. Is there any way he ascends? I mean, he's a guy that is always mentioned as potential, a potential GM guy.
So Jimmy Haslam essentially ruled that out yesterday. But again, I think that was one of those situations where if they get the person they want or the people they want, then Elliott Wolf will stay in the assistant GM role. If they have to go back and maybe settle for Mike McCarthy, then maybe you say, okay, let's just make Elliott Wolf the GM. Right now, I don't think the plan is for Wolf to be the GM. I think if it was the plan, then they probably would have already made the move.
Are you fairly certain that it's that Patriot mix that they really want in McDaniel and either Caserio? And by the way, Caserio, his contract's up, so he was he wanted to go. I can't remember which team it was.
There were some Texans rumors.
I think it was, and they blocked that move. So he refused to sign an extension on his contract. So he's pretty much free to go.
Yeah, he's free to go, and it sounds like Houston wants to keep their setup with Bill O'Brien kind of running things as the GM there, so that's really not an option. So it's set up if that's the direction they want to go. And then the other thing to watch, of course, is if they go with Stefanski, do they bring back Andrew Berry, who's a guy that the Haslams really like. He left the organization. He wasn't fired. He just decided to leave when kind of the Green Bay guys took over. He worked here for a year, and then he decided to go to Philadelphia. Would they maybe try and bring him back? And then, of course, you'd have to ask, would he want to come back here? He knows what this building is like. He knows what it's like in Berea. And now, obviously, he's got those Paul DePodesta ties. That might be why he would come back. But he's got a good thing going in Philadelphia, too, which is a model organization. Would he want to come back? He's really young. He's got a long career ahead of him, but we also know what the Browns can do to some of those long careers.
Are you? Is there any other name that you've heard that is a potential guy to at least listen out for?
I just think that's really kind of the main list right now. I don't think there's as huge a pool for the GM as there's the coach. And part of that is because we don't know who the coach is going to be. And they want to get that in place first. I would just think the main core to keep an eye on right now is those two New England guys, Andrew Berry. And, let's just kind of put Elliott Wolf away a little bit, and maybe they circle back on that.
Are you surprised that McCarthy came in so early, or is it a function just of timing? Because a lot of the guys they want, you can't talk to. Like the Patriot guys, you can't talk to because they're playing this weekend.
I think part of it is timing, and maybe McCarthy wants to get his name out there as, hey, I'm doing interviews. Anybody who wants to come talk to me, I'm doing them. I think maybe the bad news for McCarthy is They interviewed him on Thursday. Jimmy Haslam came down at a press conference mid-interview, and then he got on a plane and went and interviewed Greg Roman. So I don't know how things are looking for Mike McCarthy to get this job, but I do think it was, the timing was right to interview him tomorrow as opposed to waiting.
So you're saying when the owner goes to get lunch midway through your interview, it's not a good sign?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd feel real confident about that.
All right. Dan Labbe, as always, we appreciate the time. We will keep up to date on the dual search for head coach and GM. And again, I think Browns fans, if you want to take a positive away from it, they're trying to get the head coach and the GM aligned, so they've learned that when those two fight, it's a bad thing.
Yeah, and look, they try. You can't. The Haslams are not passive owners. At least they try, and hopefully this time they'll land on the structure and the right people to put in it.
They're due. They're due to get it right. You know?
There you go.
1 out of 4 or 5 has to hit.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. When we return, we'll preview some of the NFL playoff action from Wild Card Weekend. More sports and less lean weekend winners edition. We'll be right back.
Get your garage ready for the holidays.
We had some cracks in the floor. We needed to enhance the beauty of it. That's when we called Nature Stone.
Nature Stone corrects uneven concrete, so you don't have to worry about tripping or slipping. And with Russell's Promise, our true unconditional warranty, you will never have to replace your garage floor again. For a limited time, get Nature Stone installed now and pay nothing until next year. Payments as low as $99 a month. No interest, no down payment. Schedule your free cost estimate easily online today. It's not just a floor. Wow, it's Nature Stone.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino now has sports betting. Use one of the 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet. Then watch your favorite games on our new HD televisions or visit our new sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Welcome back to more sports and Les Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. AFC wildcard games get Wildcard Weekend underway in the NFL tomorrow. I want to remind you, legalized sports wagering just an hour away from downtown Cleveland, right off of I-90 in Erie, Pennsylvania. Presque Isle Downs and Casino, the Bet America Sportsbook, 50 state-of-the-art touchscreen betting kiosks. Put your money in, a couple of touches, you get your betting slip, and you're good to go. Again, that's just a little over an hour away from downtown Cleveland, right off of I-90. You can see it from the freeway as well. It's Presque Isle Downs and Casino in Erie, Pennsylvania, the Bet America Sportsbook. Well, Wildcard Weekend gets underway. The AFC games are on Saturday, tomorrow, and it is the Bills and the Texans getting things underway as this one in Houston, and the Texans 2.5 point favorites over the Bills. Buffalo not good against playoff teams this year, just one win in 5 games. The Bills defense has been pretty good, holding opponents to 24 points or less 9 games in a row. J.J. Watt expected to come back and play for the Texans. He's missed 8 games with a torn pectoral muscle. Interesting to see how effective Watt will be. Josh Allen has been good. Only 2 interceptions in the past 11 games, leading the Bills into the playoffs. Of course, the Browns did beat the Bills during the regular season this year. The night game, the Patriots hosting the Titans. Patriots 5-point favorites at home, over under 44 on that one. And the Patriots haven't played in a wild card game since back in 2010. They usually get byes through this round of the playoffs. Titans 7-3 since Ryan Tannehill took over as the starting quarterback, and Patriots defense, it'll give them a challenge. Only giving up a little over 14 points a game. Derrick Henry beat out Nick Chubb for the rushing title, over 1,500 yards. A.J. Brown has been really good. A touchdown in his last 4 games, the wide receiver for the Titans. NFC games take over Sunday. The first one, the Vikings at New Orleans. The Saints 8-point favorites at home, over under 50 on that one. And an exciting game. The last time these two played, it was the Minnesota Miracle a couple years ago. Vikings won on the final play of regulation, 61-yard touchdown to Stephon Diggs. New Orleans has not been good at home when they are playoff favorites. 2-10 against the spread in their last 12. Saints do score 36 points, better than 36 points their last 7 games. Cook really good for the Vikings offense. Breeze and Thomas outstanding for the Saints. Michael Thomas leads the league, over 1,700 yards receiving. The late game that will wrap up wildcard weekend, Seahawks at the Eagles, and Seattle, a 1.5-point road favorite, over under 46 on this. Marshawn Lynch back with the Seahawks. Picked him up last week after they put their 3rd running back on IR for the season. Couple of Eagle receivers on IR might be able to play, Aguilar and Zach Ertz. Eagles lost to the Seahawks 17-9 in Seattle back in Week 12. Russell Wilson has been outstanding at 31 touchdowns, just 5 picks. And Carson Wentz. Now the Eagles 9-2 when Wentz does not throw an interception in a game. They're 0-5 when he does. So that's something to keep an eye on. If Wentz gets intercepted, not good for the Seattle Seahawks. Again, that is how things will line up all weekend long. It is wildcard weekend in the NFL. AFC on Saturday, NFC on Sunday. Want to remind you, legalized sports wagering just a little over an hour away from downtown Cleveland at Presque Isle Downton Casino, right off of I-90 in Erie, Pennsylvania. 50 state-of-the-art Bet America touchscreen betting kiosks, easy to do. You can get in, you can get out. They're located throughout the casino. A really convenient thing, just an hour away from downtown Cleveland. That'll do it for us on this edition of More Sports and Les Levine, the Weekend Winners edition. Les Levine will be back in the chair Monday evening from 6 to 7. We'll see you again back here next Friday on the Weekend Winners edition. Stay safe. Have a great weekend, everybody.